All right. I wanted to talk about um, does gear matter? Yeah. Oh, I see. When I do my videos, this camera, I don't know if it's because it's trying to process. So I might have a little bit of delay, but it's all good. At least you can hear me. And at least you can see me. So I don't know how much of the delay, you know, I am going to it's time to upgrade my computer because probably just don't, I think I need to get a gaming computer, like 64 gigs of RAM and i9 processor and things like that. But anyhow, want to talk about does gear matter, or basically expensive gear versus affordable gear? Because I've seen this subject starting to come up on a few channels. Um, and basically, it seemed like this subject is a never ending. It seemed like it's a never ending subject. Oh yeah, there go my neighbor with his driving by with his car with 25 subs in it. I got a neighbor that's got to have attention, so his system is loud. But uh, anyhow, um, so appreciate it. Welcome, Matty Two Hats. I want to talk about expensive gear. What's going on, CC Funk? Um, Welcome. Uh, we're going to talk about gear. Um, and basically, I think gear, especially expensive gear or even affordable gear, only it depends on what you like to record or how you like to record. That's the only time gear really matters. Born Shamir, welcome, Born Shamir. I think that's the only time it matters is let's say, for example, you're building, especially if you're going to build a recording studio or you're doing a recording studio, right? But your intent is not to be a home recording studio. Let's say you want to build a commercial studio. So you're looking for a building, a place you can rent or lease, and you got to make sure it's within zone or code, because some places you just can't buy a building and do recording without make sure it passes code. So let's say you find all that. Let's say you find this building, whatever, and you want to record clients. So now you have to decide, well, am I going to do, bands, um, and so forth? He says streaming gear matters. Yeah. Well, actually, it's not the streaming gear. It's the uh, it's the computers. It's just I need to upgrade my computer. But anyhow, welcome War Hard Arts. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit laggy, but if you can deal with the live stream a little bit of laggy, then at least the video looked better. So anyhow, so what I'm talking about is it really is going to matter if who and what you want to record. Like for example, just because someone starts a commercial recording studio doesn't mean that the commercial recording studio is going to be fit for every client, right? You got some clients that are maybe an R&B band or jazz band, whatever. Well, maybe the engineer only knows how to record rock or metal. Well, you might run into a little bit of problems then too. So that's gonna matter too. What gear down to even choosing a console. For example, it is well known. Well, SSL consoles, as an example, an SSL, let's say a 4,000 or 6,000, whatever. Even though they engineered that console to be an all-around console for recording and everything else, it turned out the SSL consoles were really great for mixing more, so simply because of the way you could route the board and so forth. Um, now, um, it was also known for certain um, consoles like MCI, maybe uh, a Harrison console, whatever, even a Neve or so forth, API. Like an API was really known for punchy. It was really a really aggressive, punchy sounding console. So they kind of liked that console more for rock. Um, versus a Neve was that it was a little bit smoother, warmer. So it was really good for like R&B and and a lot of live and so forth. So it really depends on it's not like, you know, some people, even if they have a commercial recording studio, it's not like they can have um a storage room full of like a variety of mixing consoles, because you're not, that's one thing you're just not going to swap out. You know, you put a console in your control room, that console's in there. They're big, they're heavy. It takes a lot to hook those up. So if there's got an SSL console or something like that in there, that's what's going in that room. Um, but um, it really depends on what you want to record. That's where gear matters. But if you are doing welcome under sound records, we're just talking about, does gear matter? Warren says I bought a used DBX 166, comes tomorrow. Okay, yeah, good. I got two of those. I got a one DBX 166 in the rack over there, and I got one downstairs in the other setup. I like those compressors. Um, so it really depends on, like, for someone who's going to do, if you are using virtual instruments and you're going to use like Ableton Live, FL Studio, Reason, Studio One, so forth like that, and you're going to use either VST Instruments software, or you're going to use the plugins or software that comes with the program, the only other source that you need to get into your DAW would be like maybe vocals. And some people use the mic pre off the interface. Um, One thing about mic pre's on interfaces, they don't have the character like an outboard pre. So they tend to sound kind of, they don't have a more, they usually tend to sound a little bit more plain, but they work. Sometimes some songs don't require for you to have a lot of color and character. Um, some kind of like the mic pre that I'm using now, this Art MP2, which is it's a tube microphone, but it's not going to have the character like my Avalon or my Warm Tone Beast or my Universal 16 or anything like that. But for some songs, this preamp going into this mixer is more than enough to get vocals done in certain songs. So it really depends on the genre of music, especially if you do a lot of electronic music, you're using a lot of VST instruments, or even if you're using sounds off of synthesizers like a Roland Phantom, or you just don't need to have a ton of a large console and a bunch of outboard gear. You just don't, unless you want it. Like me, I grew up that way in recording studios, this setup way. So, it's kind of like familiar. So I prefer this workflow, but you don't have to have this workflow. Now, if you were going to record orchestras or bands and things like that, this would be a must. You got to have the you got to have the channel count, you got to have the gear, you got to have especially for recording a lot of instruments. So that's when gear is going to matter. And it's the same thing with whether it's affordable gear or an expensive gear. I can use a $300 preamp, which is an affordable piece of gear, or I use a $3,000 Avalon like I got, which is expensive gear. And I'll say, for example, my Art MPA 2s, those are affordable mic pre's. You can get those for about $300 to $400. That's in a very affordable preamp. Will it sound bad? No, it won't. Will it have the same character like the Avalon? No. But do you necessarily have to have the Avalon? No. Can you definitely do well with the MPA, the Art MPA? Yes. But believe it or not, some people say, well, really good mic pre, what's going to matter more? A good mic pre or a good microphone? And it's the same thing I would say. If anyone is into photography, you're going to do a lot better with better lenses, more expensive lenses. Even if you have a cheap body, you would do a lot better with better lenses. Or you're going to do a lot better with better quality microphones than you would good quality mic pre. But of course, if you have a combination of both, then that helps. But if someone asks me, what would if I can only afford one or the other, a really nice, high quality microphone and an okay, decent, really nice, like the Art MPA that I have. And I say they had at least, let's say the Warm Audio Tone Beast or a Warm Tone Beast. The Warm Audio, let's say the Warm Audio WA87, which is about $799. I would say buy the Warm Audio 87 microphone and then buy the Art MPA. You're going to do very well with that setup than trying to buy like a Need preamp and you got a $100 microphone. So really, it depends. Okay, I got a couple of things coming. Let's see, my keyboard, 4 keys, stop playing. Let's see, my little keyboard, 4 keys, stop playing. What's a little keyboard, 4 keys? I'm not familiar with that, but and then let me see. I think I missed a couple of comments. Okay, a Warhorse. I wanted. Are you asking me have I used the mic pre's on my console, my Allen Heath? And he goes, yeah, they're yeah, it's an Allen Heath, so not being condescending about it, but yeah, they are very usable mic pre's on the console. So I've used them before. Now, most of my mic pre's I use outboard gear because that's the flavor I'm looking for. But if you had an Allen Heath console, let's say you don't have to be like this 3800. Let's say it's the GL 2400, whatever. They basically have the same mic pre's. Could you get away with buying an Allen Heath 2400, 24 channel Allen Heath analog console and just using the mic pre's in that? Yes, you could. You definitely could. Let me see. Matt just said I built my whole rig, including instruments, for about 6,500 USA. I've done 4 albums and they good. That's cool. Which is probably all you really need. Let's see. Oh, Warsus, he's asked me, did I think the MIDI key? Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's unfortunately when it comes to MIDI keyboards and stuff like that, or electronics altogether, they break. I've had I replaced the power supply on this PC I'm using right now twice. The power supply in this computer over here failed before. I've had computers break, preamps go out. It's just electronics, just there's no way around it. The thing that sucks is if you have a PC or Mac and you're doing all your work and all of a sudden it fails and you can't get your music or whatever. That's why I have backup. I always have a backup system. So like, for example, I'm using my PC and if it fails, I can still record to my hard disk recorder, or I can still record to my Mac over here. Or I can still record to ADAT as a last resort. I always have a backup, always. And the good thing about the hard disk recorder, and the ADATs is that I can still record, mix, and everything, print, and all my songs without ever having to use a computer because I got enough outboard gear to do everything. That's the reason why I built a system like this, for that very reason. So Oh, so Matthew said about 10 grand Australian. Oh, okay, got you 6,500 US, 10 grand. Yeah, I think because I think whether it's Canada, Australia, or overseas prices can be different than the US. Warren says I need to play more and buy less. Yeah, I'm guilty of that too. I need to create and record more instead of always buying gear, stuff like that. So, man, since got a question. If I had to start again, would you rebuy your high-end preamps or just rebuy your clones? If I had to do it again, let me tell you, knowing what I know now and clone companies that are available now, I would definitely go the clone company route. And I'll say this. I was commenting on Barry Johns, and he was talking, he was doing a demonstration about a microphone. I think it's by a company, I can't forget the name of the company. And the microphone's about $699. And it's a U87 microphone clone. Now everyone knows when it comes to clones, everyone knows what gear they're imitating. But I think clone rigs, you can't tell the difference now, whether it's Warm Audio, Stam Audio, Audioscape, Ventec. I know people say even with BAE being as expensive as Neve, but BAE is still a clone company. It's not a Neve. Some people may justify, I got a BAE, and it may be $3 grand, but when you're paying that kind of price for a BAE, just go buy a Neve. If you're going to be up in that level of paying that kind of money, just go get the Neve. But yes, I think clone companies, whether it's preamps, Warm Audio, you could probably build an entire studio just using Warm Audio's stuff. The 117060 there, the LA2A and all that. And of course, I think that technically with the clone companies being as popular as they are now, along with, it's the same thing with plugins. I think all the big name products are kind of in trouble. They may not want to admit, or they may not want to share their profits and loss reports to the public out of embarrassment. But I think even when I go to see some of these studio tours that, like, say for example, Warren Hewitt does, or some of the other channels that do studio tours, and then we're talking even the big commercial recording studios, there's very few that don't have some pieces of clone in their racks instead of having, Channel Limited or Tube Tech, Universal Audio, Distress, and all the big name stuff. I've seen some Art Pro VLA compressors in those racks too. I'm like, and a Pro VLA you can get probably $300 or $400. They're very affordable compressor, and they're very good compressors. So it really, I think, yes, if I was to do it all again, I would go the clone route, because you can, it's kind of like my Lindell Audio Pultec style EQs. Those are $300-$400 a piece. I got two of them. I don't know if you can see it over my shoulder, this shoulder here, but those are the Lindell Audio. Very, very affordable. You can get them on Z Sounds. Very affordable. Pultec style EQs. Why spend $9 grand on a Pultec when you can buy the Lindell Audio? No one's going to hear the difference in that in a mix anyway, whether you use the Pultec or the Lindell Audio. Some people, they're always going to be the gear snob to swear you can hear the difference, but those are people that just, if you're not paying attention, you're not going to, no, that's not a Pultec. No one can tell. Some people can't even tell the difference between the sound if it was mixed on an SSL, API, or Neve. So I know that was a kind of a long answer to your question, but yes, I would definitely go the clone route. They're affordable, way more affordable. Welcome, Rockport Tigger. Is it Tigger or Tiger? I have an SSL UC and you have auto controller and SSL Slate bundle. The number got you, Artur. Yeah, okay, got you. Been running at Reaper 9% of the time. Yep, good. That's a good good DAW. Yeah, it's just more than anything that anyone really needs. Yeah, and like I said, it really depends on what you do. Now, some people if they're recording bands and they're still running, orchestra, and they still need to run through an actual this is a 48 channel console. This is going to be more beneficial because of the amount of channel count and so forth. But for a lot of modern music, what you have is more than enough. Okay. Oh yeah, Rock Racer, but Andrew Masters too. Yeah, he does them too. So let me see. Yep. Let me see where it says I usually buy gear. I usually buy gear when I'm finished the album as reward. It's all part of it. Gotcha. Okay. So let me see what else. Oh yeah, right. Analog Obsession. Yeah, I like some of their plugins. I got some of their plugins. They got a really nice channel strip by Analog Obsession. They got a nice channel strip plugin that I use. Let's see what else. Warsa, so you're going to give away the Avalon? No. Rockport said that's a full studio you have over there. You have, yep, I got a lot of gear. And that's just part of that's the gas in me, gear acquisition syndrome. That's just, but I like, you got to look at it. If you can afford it, like I could afford it and I could buy it, I'm going to buy it, So, yep, I'm a hoarder. I sure am. I'm a gear hoarder. I got it bad. I need to get rid of some of my keyboards, sell some of my keyboards. But those are hard keyboards to get. So, but yeah, yeah, we love our tools. Yep. Yeah, Matthew said, if you can afford to go, yep, exactly. That's right. You can afford it, go for it. Plus, the thing is, unlike some of the people that watch the channel, I don't have a nagging wife to tell me, how to spend my money. So anyhow, Rockport says he's got 80,000 songs in his library. You got more than I do. Matthew said there are way worse things to spend it on. That's right, like crack. Crack cocaine is probably a way worse habit than to spend it on gear. But anyhow, so that's the subject for tonight that I want to talk about is because there's still, you'll probably see it every now and then. I've seen some studio tours by some guys now. They kind of frown down when some guys if he's got a warm audio instead of an actual universal audio in his racks or whatever. It is kind of like, why are you frowning? If it gets the job done, who cares what gear it's on or the name of the gear? If it's getting the job done, that's what matters. I always plagiarize, or I had to kind of quote what Andrew Sheps says all the time. Only thing that matters is what's coming out of the speakers. So Rockport says a nagging wife is known as an ex-wife. Yes, she's an ex. I don't have an ex. Yeah, she's an ex. So our man, I record about 100 and thought that was a lot. Yeah, I probably got about 300 or 400 myself, but 80,000. I don't have that many. I don't have that many either. That's right. Yeah, so all I care about is sound good. It sounds good. That's right. But so, and if you think about it, going back to the gear, if it goes back to the gear, really it boils down to what gear you want to buy and do you actually need it? Do you need expensive gear? I'm going to say in today's, with all the cologne, just like I was quoting with was asking earlier about would I do it all again? Would I get expensive gear? No, because the clones, the only way I would get the expensive gear, well, let me put it like this. I'll say it like this. Like my Avalon, and I have two of them. They're about $3,000, right? In some instances, they got up to 35, whatever, because they're just an extremely popular mic pre, right? Channel strip. I didn't pay that for them. I went down to Nashville. One guy was advertising that he had an Avalon 737, and it was on Reverb, and he happened to live in Nashville. And he's like, I'm selling for $1,600. So I bought it for $1,600, not $3,000. But that's how I got a lot of my gear. I don't spend, I always look for deals. I'm like everyone else. If I can find a deal on Reverb, I don't care if it's eBay, Amazon, wherever, pawn shop, it doesn't matter. And if it's a good deal, I'm snatching it up. That's how I got a lot of my gear. So let me see. Missed a few comments. Says Rockport said, have you ever heard Bob Clearmountain talk about sound treatments and don't use them? It's kind of like you only need sound treatment when you got sound issues. But if you don't have sound issues, you don't need it. That's the only time you need to treat the room is when you have room problems with the room. You get these weird room noise, nodes, weird reflections, sound pressure levels, or whatever, just weird room reflections and all that. Then you want to address it. Like if you get this weird, like whenever you're mixing and you get your stuff is too bass heavy, you probably need to control the low end in the mix. So you're not bass heavy, because what can sound one way in a room, but if it's not translating to all your mediums, meaning a phone, car stereo system, or you go somewhere else and listen to it, it needs to translate. If it doesn't translate, then when you're mixing, because most of the time, believe it or not, the biggest thing I've always heard when people do music and something's wrong with their mix is either it's got too much highs or it's got too much lows are the biggest issues, or the mid-range is muddy, or it could be a combination of all three. Too much bass, too much highs, and the mid-range is muddy. Believe it or not, then they could be mixing on something like KRKs or whatever, which it can be a bass heavy speaker, whatever. And in their room, it's bumping. But when they go to the car, it sounds like, man, it don't sound good in the car. That's the room. Let's see. Oh, he says, Rockport says, the gear is only good if you know how to use it. Well, that's basically any, that's anything. That's a DAW. It's only good if you know how to use it. Because if you don't know how to use your DAW, you're losing out on so many options and capabilities when you don't know how to use your DAW. You'd be amazed how many people don't know how to use their DAW or have functions they never knew it had. Let's see. CC Function, did you check out the Jimmy Jam video I spoke about before? Before, man, he has plenty of. Oh, I've seen Jimmy Jam, and I've been trying to find him to do full-fledged. They've done a walk around where they talked about some of the keyboards that he used and stuff like that. But to actually see the actual studio and control room, I saw one video where they were doing an interview. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis did an interview with what's my man from BET, Donnie Simpson. They did a video with him, and they was doing, they were letting Donnie hear a little bit of, Black Pantyhose song by, The Time. But you didn't see all the outboard gear and everything else. You just saw a little bit of that snippet. So I've been wanting to see, just like I would love to see. I've seen its and bits and snippet pictures of Prince's studio. You can kind of see, but you don't get a full detailed tour which I would love to have seen what he had up there in Paisley Park, a full detailed tour. But I don't, the family that's running his estate, it's I don't know. So anyhow, Rockport says I buy a deal to flip it to get what I want. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I got friends that do that. They'll get some gear and they want something else, so they'll sell something or whatever. A lot of people do that. But on Max, I get cost price through my work, so that helps. Hey, any way you can do it, whatever your hustle is, any way you can do it. Like for me, I'm always looking for a deal. So if I find something on Reverb, sometimes you take a chance, and sometimes every blue moon you get a piece of gear that don't work. Usually you see, yeah. And then of course there's always Z sound. So you can always, I've done that too, where you can buy a piece of gear and make payments on it. I've done that too. You're paying $50, $60 a month for a year or whatever. I've done that. A lot of people do that. Z Sounds is really good for that. So if you want to load yourself up with some really expensive gear and just make payments on it, I recommend Z Sounds. What's great about it is you ain't got to worry about trying to fill out a credit app or whatever. They just need your debit card information, and after that, you just in good faith you make your payments. Like me, I make my payments. So that's how I've gotten some gear. That's how I picked up some of those Lindell audio stuff through Z Sound. Let me see what else. Welcome, Learn and Grow. Do I own an ASR10? No, I've used to play with an ASR10, and I also used to play with the EPS 16 Plus, the Ensoniq EPS 16 Plus sampler. I did an album from artists back in the 90s where I used sounds like Thunder Sounds for that. But yeah, the ASR10 was a hot commodity, especially when it first came out, because it was one of the few sequencing sampling monsters out there. It was a beast. The one thing I never liked about the downside of those boards was that you always had to load up. So a lot of times the operating system, and then you had to load up the samples and all that, and then you had to store it to a floppy to store your stuff. So you imagine the amount of floppy disk when everyone had ASR10s, the amount of songs they had on floppy disk. But other than that, it was a killer board. But I had always had, my first board was an Ensoniq SQ1 Plus. I was doing most of my stuff on that. I also have the Ensoniq KT88. I also have an Ensoniq MSR61. I also have an Ensoniq TS12. So I really love Ensoniq gear. I just wish that Ensoniq didn't go out of business, because Ensoniq had Ensoniq, especially for that MSR61 that I got. That's probably, as far as sequencing on that board, that's probably has the easiest sequencer workflow of any keyboard I've ever seen. And I got 20 synthesizers, and that's no lie. I actually have 20 synthesizers. And I would say, if you want to get a synthesizer that you can just start, and it's one of those boards you can learn how to use without ever reading the owner's manual. Most of these other boards, like my Roland my XP80, my Roland Phantom, my Chord Triton, my Chord Trinity, my Roland Phantom G6, and Roland, all those type of boards, I got to pull out the manual on some of that stuff. But not that you can look at it. It basically tell you it's so easy. But anyhow, let me get off the Ensoniq. But yes, let me get back to the original question. I liked ASR10s samplers, but now that every other board, like my Triton Studio, can sample, I was like, there'd be no need to own an ASR10s, because ASR10s don't have any sound libraries on, there's no sound banks in it. At least I can sample in my Roland Phantom. I can sample in my Triton. I can sample in my Ensoniq, because I got, Korg. I got the Korg Not only do I have the Core Triton and the Core Studio and Trinity, but I also have the Core Cronus. And all of Core Cronus can sample. So there you go. That, let me move on to some more chats. Rockport. Let me see. I missed something else. I think I missed something. Or they cut the low end and screws up the top of the vice. Oh, you're talking about, I think when it comes to mixing, yeah. So I missed a few chats. So Warhorse said people rely on plug-in presets. They don't know the knob though. Well, it's kind of like and this is true. I remember when Andrew Sheps came out with his channel strip, the Andrew Sheps channel strip. You can get it through Waves. If you don't understand gear, you won't understand that plugin either. But if you understand gear and how to use it, you'll understand. If you understand gear and how it works, I don't care if it's a mic pre, an EQ, compressor, and all that, you can look at any plugin and pretty much like, oh yeah, because I know what that plugin is doing. So you can do that. That's usually the biggest issue, which was another thing I was going to talk about too when it comes to this gear. CC Funk said I hated the sequencing and the floppy drive thing. Oh yeah, that was, like I said, I did an album and I used an EPS6. It wasn't mine. It was a friend of mine, and he had the Ensoniq EPS16 Plus. He still has an ASR10 rack. He doesn't have the keyboard. He has a rack. When I talked to him, he still had the ASR10 unless he got rid of it. I had to ask him, but that was my only drawback. Is kind of now, it was high end in the 90s, but as keyboards gotten so much better. The Triton comes out. Triton came out in 99. The Phantom came out in 01, and so forth. And all these boards can sample. Yeah, it's like, why would you need an SR10? I could sample on the Triton Studio, which was like the Triton Studio the Triton Studio was probably the biggest hip hop R&B board of all time in the early 2000s. That was Timbaland. I mean, Mariah Carey's E equals MCC squared. That's a Triton Studio board. If you ever listen to that album by Mariah Carey, that's a Triton Studio keyboard. Timbaland was using the Triton Studio heavy to do a lot of tracks he did for Jay-Z and a lot of artists. That the Neptunes, that was their board. And I was hip to it when it came out because I got my Triton Studio in 03. I still can make an album and make it a modern sound today, still with my Triton Studio. I think it was so powerful. That's why they came out with a plug-in. But anyhow, so Rockport said you can upgrade the crap out of yeah, you can. That's the board. And then of course when they fooled around and came out with the Cronus. First it was the Oasis, which was like the flagship, but it was like $1 million. And then it came out with the Cronus. The Cronus is like my board. The Cronus is my board for Corp products. The Cronus, and of course I got Yamaha boards too. I got the Motif. I got the Motif XF. I don't have a Montage yet. I'm gonna get a Montage, but I do have the Motif. But I do have the Roland Phantom. I have the Roland Phantom S, the G, the G6, the G8, and also the new Roland. And it's upgraded to it's really the Roland Phantom EX because I'm updated it. But anyhow, welcome Quablo. It says an upright piano is a preset. Hammond organ is a preset. Okay. Undersound, Rick Record says, is it just me or does it seem like analog gear is fading out with all these interfaces being controlled by a computer? It's not you. Analog gear is fading out analog is fading out for certain genres of music. Analog fade is not like, for example, if you go to Nashville, which is predominantly country and western, where they still record musicians, they still use session musicians, and it's called the Nashville Music Chart, and they still hire session musicians, and 99% of all the music come out of Nashville country western music is still recorded the traditional way. The only thing that they've probably gotten rid of is like tape machines. Most of them they're using ADDD converters going into like Pro Tools, but everything else is still large format console and racks of gear. So I think it's fading for, like, for example, if you do trap, EDM, dubstep, hip hop, arm, whatever, a lot of that is DAW dependent and plugin dependent. You are not going to need any of this gear, not the gear that I got in my studio or any commercial recording studio gear like that. You just don't need it, because you don't have to worry about, why would you need to plug into a console when you're using the software that's already in the DAW, or DAW sees that DVST as a plug-in. There's no cables needed or whatever, right? Same thing with plugins. There's no rack. You don't need a patch bay for plugins. You just drag and drop or whatever. So I think that's what's fading, is that side of it. But there's still, believe it or not, even though it seems that a lot of people are going to in the box type of stuff, but believe it or not, there's still millions of people, and I'm talking not just United States, worldwide, that still go to commercial type studios that still have a console with rack gear. That's why it's still somewhat popular. But it depends on the genre of music. Let me see. Rockford says, I use my presets. Man, open a preset to listen to what someone did, or what possible new and be. Yeah, sometimes it's good to start, especially if you want a preset for EQ on drums or a compressor setting, something like that. I used to have some cheat charts. I still got some cheat charts right here, like for EQ, for example, where to cut, where to boost, stuff like that. I use this as a reference chart. I got more reference charts, like, right, like I use something like this. This has like, where to set the EQ and why would you do it for different instruments, stuff like that. You get stuff like this off the internet, and I always use as a reference point to start somewhere. Like, how do I want to make horns sound like horns, like they do, when they recorded horns at like Capitol Studios? Well, what's the frequency ranges for like trumpets? Well, I'm gonna set my EQs like that, especially if I'm using a plugin or if I'm using an actual EQ on the console, whatever. I do the same thing, and generally get the horns to sound like they do on any other pro level record. I follow the same guidelines. So let me see. Sponsors, I learned on that cue. Oh, okay, the ASR 10. Like I said, that was a beast of a synthesizer. It was the ASR 10, and it's still popular. I think what made people like the ASR 10 a lot too is because when you got all your samples and you loaded all your sounds and samples into the ASR 10 and you did your sequences, when you came out of that, in Sonic, something about the processing that made those sound like already ready to go records coming out of the ASR 10. It already sounded like an already ready to go record coming out. It was amazing. Like me, I was really blown away when I was using my Sonic SQ, the SQ1 Plus. The reverb in that was so good. That's why they came out with the Sonic DP4. It was that good of a reverb unit. I still want an Sonic DP4 reverb unit. Those things are still kind of pricey, even today. But the EQ or the reverb course, delay and all that on that is stellar. And that's another mixing secret, So welcome, Man Network. It says, yes, I use analog on every genre. I love it. Like me, I have analog. Which is sometimes people realize, there's always still an ongoing debate. Do I need analog or not? I just like the way, even if I'm using plugins or whatever, when I'm running through the console, I just like the way it sounds coming through the console. So that's the reason why I have it. But Warhorse says I'm DAWless, which is, like I would tell anyone in this recording business, there's absolutely no one way, or you have to have, a large console with a tape machine and outboard gear. That's the only way it's going to sound. No, I would never tell anyone that. it's already been proven that there are hundreds of ways to record and mix and everything else. And if you know what you're doing, all of it sound right. All of it sound good. So let's see. Sponsors, I do too. That's why I have it. I also like plugins. I like everything really. So Rockport said East West OPS is the super shiz. I hear you. Yeah, I don't have an experience. He said I have a lower cost Lexus. I do too. I have the MX200. I don't have like an X Lexicon L480 or 480L, whatever it's called. Was that like a $3,000 whatever? Like I don't have an Eventide H3000, which is what $4,000 whatever. I don't have one of them either. I would love to have one, but those Eventide like the H3000, H4000, so forth, they're just expensive. Like an AMS delay and all that. I don't have that either. Those were some of that's one of the pieces of gear you saw in pretty much every studio other than like a Space Echo delay or something like that. But once again, let's talk about this gear for a quick second. When you go to, let's talk about all these recording studios, right? And let's really talk about these commercial studios and the gear they have, whether it's, I won't even name a famous one. That's just the common ubiquitous type of commercial studio, right? So you got a guy he builds a recording studio. So what he does is first thing they do is they build the room, the control room, they build the live room. They build to the specs they want to do for this, whatever the case. They're gonna do the tie lines, and they're gonna do all the cabling and the wiring and the ground system. And then they're going to build, the live room the way they need to build it. They're going to have a drum booth, piano booth, vocal booths. They're going to go get gobos. They're going to go get diffusers, and they can change the way the rooms sound. The same way you would see like Abbey Road's live room or United Way's live room or Ocean Way's or East West live room, where they can change the panning to change the way the room sounds. Then in the control room, they're going to go and they're going to pick a console, an API Legacy or an SSL. They're going to pick all this gear, right? They're going to get all the ubiquitous outboard gear, a couple of LA2As, maybe four Universal Audio 1176s, maybe a couple of Rev E, maybe a couple of Rev D, maybe a Blue Stripe. They might go get a couple of distressors, maybe a Fairchild 670. They're going to go get some Neve style and API style preamps. They're going to go and get maybe some other niche gear, maybe some Tube Tech, maybe some Chandler Limited, or whatever gear. They go get all this gear, right? Then they go get the microphones. They're going to get Telefunken, Newman microphones. As far as studio monitors, they're going to, a lot of them like to pick NS10s, Yamaha's NS10s. They're known for mixing for mid-range, right? Then I'll go get a set of another near-field monitors, maybe a pair of ATC 25, or maybe a pair of barefoot, whatever the case, maybe some Focal, some Adams. Then they might put in the wall some Osbergers or Westlakes or whatever, or Ocean Way in the walls, right? Big, large, far field monitors. So this is the typical, this is what most of these recording studios, they build them like that. And I'll go get a tape machine, 24-inch Studer, 800 or whatever. And they'll go order, MCI, whatever tape machine they're going to get, or maybe a couple of Studers or whatever. And they'll get all this the same common gear you see in 90% of these recording studios. And the thing is, a lot of them do that because they some of these guys that build these studios anticipate that their clients are going to be Green Day, as an example, right? System of a Down, or whatever the band is, maybe an old style band, Huey Lewis and the News or whatever. They anticipate it's going to be a band. So they're anticipate going to mic the drum cabinets, going to mic drums. They're going to get this drum room sound. Not realizing sometimes you have to understand that, and a lot of guys think that that's the clientele and that's the music we need to be recording, and that's what we need to cater to, not realizing, look how big your K-pop audience is, as an example, which is Korean popular music, right? Or look how big the EDM music genre and listeners are. Look how big the hip hop community is. Look how big the trap music is, and all these other genres, which does not require nowhere near any of that. Most of the time, you can have, someone might, let me see if I can zone my camera down. If I can zone my camera down, right? I'm gonna zone my camera down. Let me see if I can, so y'all can see it. I got my hand on, right? This MPC, right? That's an older MPC. It's the MPC Renaissance, right? Right. So let me get my camera back into where I want it. Okay. There's guys that do a lot of music that's all you need, an MPC. And that's just, like I said, it ain't got to be a Renaissance or like the studio got it. The new MPCs, or even the Roland MV 8000 or whatever. That maybe a doll. That's all that's required in a lot of music, or using Ableton Live. So that is all that is required. And sometimes with that, and you got an MPC or something like that, an interface. Okay, what interface you got? You can have an Apollo Twin. You can have an Audient. The M Audio, a Focusrite 2i2, whatever, and that's just to get 2 channels of vocals in, and you might even just use the preamps on that, and a microphone, and with MPC software or a software like Reason. That's all you need in a lot of music. So it's kind of like, that's the reason why there's such a pull between, especially if you got guys that started, you have a lot of guys that are maybe 60, 70, 80 years old. They started in the 60s or maybe 70s, 80s. And they started where music had to be done on a console with tape machines and outboard gear. And, back in the 80s, where 90% of the music being done was done by some sort of band. It didn't matter what genre of music it was done on the band, R&B, Earth, Wind and Fire, pop band, Duran Duran or whatever, rock band, AC/DC, led, Def Leppard or whatever, or if it's country, whatever the case, that was done that way, and they recorded. But you can do modern music in Ableton Live with a MIDI controller. In some instances, this is all you need: a MIDI controller and some software. Let me. So I got some more questions. Let me some more stuff come in. He says, Warren says, I use digital recorders though, no tape. Yeah, like I said, I don't have a tape machine. I would love to have it because I've worked on tape machines. I would love to have one, but I'm not. It's not like I'm seeking out to have a tape machine. I also got ADATs, but I hadn't used my ADATs in years. But I can record that way, but it's just so much easier to record into a DAW, especially with the converters that I got, like the Antelope and the Marketer Unicorns I got, the HD Marketer Unicorns that I got. The Warren's bottom line downline is the final mix, right? That's all it really matters down is the final mix. Warren, the industry standards means something to big names. Yeah. And it's just really, there are still people, it's kind of like, it's almost like people that still think record labels are a necessity to make it. you know, I would say, I would say, if someone wants to get on a record contract, right? Um, record labels definitely can help you. They can definitely help you, but I would tell anyone that when it comes to a record label, just understand your record contract. And I'll leave it at that. Just make sure you understand your recording contract. Um, let's see. Warheart says that their records are beloved by beat. Yeah. C Funk said I have the MPC, but it's a newer one. Yeah, some people have the new one. Like I said, I still rock my MPC Renaissance and the MPC Studio because they work for what I do on an MPC. So that's why I'm not upgrading, because it works. I'm not doing these specific, because most of the stuff I do is in dolls. So let me see. Oh yeah, record. Unisound Record says I love analog gear, but it feels like the companies are pushing out us in a corner. Once again, here's what I think. Because I'm not pro in the box, or I'm not pro analog. I'm like, whatever, if the music sounds good, because you can have all the best in the box stuff that you got, whether it's whether you're using Pro Tools, Ableton Live, and the best plugins or whatever, the best VST instruments or whatever, or you could be working on a high-end Neve console, all the best preamps and outboard gear, but really boils down to is the song any good. It's not even so much even if the talent. You definitely want to have amazing singers and artists, but even if you have amazing singer artists, if they're still not making good records, because every now and then Stevie Wonder has made some songs that weren't that good. Mariah Carey, Mary J. Blige, a lot of artists have made songs you go, I like Mary J. Blige, but I don't like that one. And that happens with a lot of artists. They get with producers or whatever, and they make songs that just, so really boils down to out of all this is the songs themselves any good. Doesn't matter what gear you use. If the song sucks, the song sucks. But if the song is good, the song is good. And I'll go, for example, I don't think there's not too many people that, for example, I'll use, since Christmas will be here in a few months, right? One of my all-time favorite Christmas songs is This Christmas by Donny Hathaway. You automatically know that was not recorded on that was not some of the best gear when that was made, because that song came out in 1970. You can definitely tell there's way better gear now than it was in the 70s. You could just hear it. You can hear, but the song is an amazing song. That's what really matters. Let's see. Let me go back to okay, so Rockports to see Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas have made multi-platinum releases in a bedroom with a cheap mic and a Mac. Because the thing is, the reason why that works is because most of the time the audience that's listening to music, they're not listening to see if it was recorded on high-end Neve or API consoles with studio tape machines and there's hundreds of thousands of outboard gear. Now, if it's done right, you won't be able to tell the difference. But people like that are really in the business and really into gear and all that can hear and like record in the bedroom or on a Mac. That's just how some people are. But to me, I don't. If you record in the bedroom and if the song sound good, the song is good. The song is good. Period. If you really think about it, let's go back to Motown era. Really, technically, Motown's live room was really a garage, an extended garage. That's all it built on the back of his house, part of his garage. That's really what that is. The Motown sound is really a garage. So, but no one's complaining about the Motown sound, right? Let me see. Let me see. Yep, most of my commercial work was done with a cheap modal keyboard. Like I said, I think I did a thing way back where I was demonstrating how I started with a cheap keyboard. I was in the army in Korea. I started with a cheap keyboard, and we recorded to a tape, an actual stereo system tape machine. And the keyboards, you go cheesy, right? But that same keyboard, when I got my Sonic SQ1 Plus, because I got it in 91, and I was recording it to it was a Hitachi double cassette. Then I started recording in a studio with an actual Tascam console. The difference that it made going from that. So it really depends on a cheap keyboard can sound really good if you got it coming through a really good system. So let me see. War says tape machines are for massages. I'm not getting that one, but okay. War says I saw Eminem talking trash and clone 1176 about clone. Oh, Eminem was talking trash about clone 11.6 and 2As. You know what? Here's the thing when you have someone like Eminem, and I'm not, whatever the case, because Eminem can say whatever he wants to say. You and I know there are records still coming out with clone 1176s and 2As. When people start trashing, if it's not an actual real top in the gear, because for example, it's like me, I don't have to, if he come in here and saw that I don't have no actual Universal Audio 1176 2As, you don't have to record here. My income is not going to be affected one way or another because Eminem didn't want to record in my studio because I have clones. Because I promise you, let's say another artist, and because when the last time Eminem actually recorded a hit? He ain't recorded something that was a hit in 5-10 years. Well, I think he did collab with LL, but think about it. If I did, let's say Mariah Carey comes in here and I use clones and it sounded amazing. You think it's gonna matter? Eminem's opinion matter because I use clones on Mariah Carey's record? No, it is not. So let me see. Oh, he's talking about his audio file. I got you. So I'm getting most of my interactions is Rockport and Warhol Arts. Gotcha. And okay. See, I got you, Rockport. I got you. Let's see. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, I got you. Okay. So getting back to what I was saying about the gear and initially talking about the gear and everything else. So does gear matter? Gear only matters for the situation. If you know that you're going to record bands, orchestras, or musicians that use analog gear like guitars, basses, drums, gear can absolutely matter. But if you're going to do hip hop, EDM music, whatever, gear is not the equation. Is not, because that's not the heart of the sound for that. A lot of sound for hip hop is a lot of that's a lot of samples and drum beats and stuff like that. So it really depends on what you plan on doing. Now, and there are a lot of people building commercial studios for themselves. There's a lot of people that aren't, they're not building recording studios for clients. Some people are building recording studios for themselves. So that also depends. So which brought me, I think, let me see. I thought I saw something else too. UD sound undersounds a plugin is a clone. If you would, yeah, exactly. So I was gonna say you might be contradicting themselves if you're gonna talk trash about the clones, like, but not talk trash about the plugins, because that's what's a plugin. Just like that's a perfect example. It's a software emulation of a piece of gear. That's all it is. That's what a plugin is. It's a software emulation. You're doing the same thing. Good analogy. Very good analogy. That says gear in the recording matters once in the box. It really doesn't. And once again, that's also subjective too. It's depending on what you do. Because there are a lot of people that will use virtual instruments, whatever the case, and they still are not liking the plugins. I've seen people where they would have software and plugins, and they say, oh, nah, this plugins, and they'll start buying some outboard gear. They might buy a compressor here, a preamp there, maybe an EQ there. They'll start buying little bits of outboard gear. They might not have nowhere near the length amount of outboard gear like I got, but I've seen a lot of people's recording studios where they might have a steel desk. They have their interface. They got the controller, their monitor, the studio monitor speakers they're using. Maybe, and on that, you'll see in the rack on the left and right, they'll have a few pieces of outboard gear, maybe a couple of mic pre's, a couple of compressors, and stuff like that. It's kind of like, you think to yourself, why do you have some compressors or some EQs if you got plugins? It's because it's something about analog in certain, especially in certain areas. It's just something about it. So let's see, Roper Apogee new compressors is identical to the identical to the gotcha. Apogee, which is a great AD to DA converter company. They're really known for their really high-end AD to DA converters. So, but they are pricey. War says disagree. Coming back out of the box and can add something less thorough. Oh, you're talking about as far as just not needing so much. Like I said, once again, it really depends on what you're doing. Sometimes some music you can just use strictly, all the instruments and just use plugins and be perfectly fine. Some stuff is it just depends on what it is. Where coming out of a console and going into outboard gear just makes all the difference in the world. So let me see. Digital audio is incapable of experiencing saturation, emulations, and math. Well, once again, like I said, that is subjective. It really depends on the goal. Well, welcome, DL. I'm doing all right. We're just talking about gear. Does gear matter? Does and especially expensive gear or even affordable gear, does it matter? And I've already given people my answer. Some people, they might not, to me, it really depends on what you're doing in the genre. Man says, I'm all about analog. My studios are filled with it. I love the sound. I love the zero latency. However, I can work without it if I had to and get commercial results. That's how I am. Exactly how I am. I'm 100% like what how man just described that. I absolutely have analog gear. People see that downstairs too. People say I got outboard gear and a analog console and stuff like that. I'm all about analog, but I can absolutely work with just plugins and software as well. But I prefer analog gear, but I don't really need it. Oh, Rockport says Chrysler Algae sold all of his. Actually, Chrysler Algae sold all of his outboard gear he's not using. Chrysler Algae is too old school. I saw where he was selling gear but Chrysler Algae is not, as far as our outboard gear, he's not doing like Michael Brower or Andrew Sheps. Chrysler Algae is definitely still using outboard gear. He just sold a lot of gear. He just don't get all his extra stuff. Let me see. Rockport says, I disagree. Once in a while, you cannot tell these days. Once again, it's subjective. It really depends on what you're doing. But here's the thing, though. One thing I can say, you definitely can tell the difference between cheap converters, I'm talking about interfaces, versus more expensive converters. That's where you really hear the difference. So, but it also depends on the listening environment that people listen to music on. Like if people just all they listen to is that cheap, crappy speaker that comes on an Android or an iPhone, you're not going to get any reference to what sounds good anyway. But if you're listening on a real stereo system, you will hear the difference. So of course, yeah, because the industry's dead. Once again, I've talked about this again. The industry is not dead because people are still performing, like the Grammys and everything else. What's dead is the business model of the music industry, meaning the traditional record label that give out $250,000 advances and stuff. That model's dead because people just don't buy CDs. That was the record label's bread and butter, was CDs sales and vinyl sales and cassette sales. But that business model is because of the streaming and downloading and everything else. You can thank Napster and all that changed all that. People realize they can get stuff, BearShare and all these pirating companies realize you can get music for, it was illegal. It was copyright infringement, but that's what people did. That kicked off around 2000. And that changed the game. People like, oh, I can get this for free. Why would I want to pay for it? And my thing is, why would you want to pay for it? You want to pay for it because of all the artists and producers and engineers that put all the hard work to give you music. That's why you want to pay for it. No different than why, like trying to go and get into a music theater for free. They put a lot of work to make those movies. You shouldn't get into a movie theater free because it took a lot of people to make that movie. Those people deserve to get paid for their work. That's a lot of work. But people seem to think music don't deserve the same respect. Yes, it does. You want to listen to music, then you want to listen to good, high quality music, then it's worth buying. But that's me. And then let's see. Oh yeah. Someone said he didn't sell it. No, he didn't. He just sold a lot of stuff that he don't use. But he's definitely old school. He's definitely going to still keep mixing on an SSL console. He's still going to use Blue Stripe 1176s, and that's just him. He may be using a little bit more plugins, but he's been endorsed and paid to use those plugins by Waves because he's endorsing them. He gets a cut of that, so of course he's going to use. He was part of the influential of monitoring those plugins as well. Let's see what else. And let's see. Man, sir, I sold my SSL too. You didn't, because I still got my Allen Heath in here. I don't see no SSL up in here. No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing. It says Rockport says, if you know what analog sound like, you can replace it. All right. Yeah, with other analog gear. Some people I can replace it with plugins. Some people are going to say that, but anyhow. And once again, let me always clarify this because I see this all the time with analog versus digital. Digital itself don't make any noise. What the real true argument really is analog versus digital conversion. Because you got to remember, digital, once it goes digital, it just becomes binary ones and zeros. That doesn't make any sound. But how well the converters, and you're listening to sampling rate, it's like listening to how, it's almost like it's like, how can I describe it? You could take a cheap camera with cheap lenses and look at a photo. Here's a better example. When I was using my webcam versus using this camera. This is a 4K camera versus the webcam I was using was probably 768. Maybe I don't think it was 10. I don't know. I don't think it was 1028. I think it was not even that. I don't think it was more like, it was not very. And because the image quality is so much better with a 4K camera, it's the same thing with your converter. Your sampling rate, with the bit rate and the sampling rate and all that of what your interface can capture as far as sound and convert it at the sample rate, and a better conversion brings out more of a high quality sound. That's why some people like to sample at 96K or 192, whatever. The sampling rate to capture this much amount of detail and the converter and the chips and the processing of that interface is that's the argument. And it's not just your interface that has conversion. Your CD player has an ADD converter. Your actual sound card on your PC or Mac is an ADD converter. A digital mixer has ADD converters in it. Anything that you're listening that's involved with anything digital has an ADD converter. It goes from analog to digital, so the computer can do all its binary, then it converts it back from digital back to analog, so we as humans can understand it. And that's the argument of how the quality of that conversion, that's the argument. Because analog is the actual real sound. If anyone wants to debate that, I don't know what else can take, because analog is the actual sound. Digital is trying to emulate what analog is already doing. But how well it can emulate that is no different than, like, when you watch a real high quality movie with a real quality camera compared to like a cheap, go back to the 70s, look at old Polaroid pictures, from a Polaroid, an instant, Kodak that took instant pictures. They snap out the picture and look at how low end quality those photos were with those film cameras compared to like modern cell phones today, or 4K, 6K, 8K video, high quality video is. That's what that's the argument. That's the real argument, is actually analog versus digital conversion. And that's why not all interfaces are equal. So he says it's not emulating and replicating. No, yes, it's emulating. It is emulating. It's copying. It's emulating. It's trying to. The people that program models this, they'll let you know that's what it's doing. It's emulating real gear. That's the whole purpose of it. But I missed a few. Intricate in court facts. Okay. Yep. Okay. I use a right person. I use a 64-bit DSP analog dead fly speakers. All correct. I got you. Intricate facts. People are listening on a cell phone giving sonic devices. It's a joke. Yeah. Well, yeah. I told you can't listen to the speakers on an iPhone listen to on an iPhone or an Android and think you're gonna have, you need to listen to a real speaker system. Let's see. So Deal says, what are my thoughts on high-end monitors and how much is the difference does it make Genelec AT's barefoot? I can say this. I don't have high-end studio monitors in my studio either. I have usable monitors, but I have listened to ATCs and barefoots, and yes, they make a difference. That's why my goal is they do make a difference. That's all I can say about it. They do make a difference. So if you could afford, set of Adams A7s or whatever, some barefoots, ATCs, whatever. You can afford it, but you also got to make sure your speakers are right for the room as well. But yes, definitely, for sure. Let me see what else. Oh, let's see, man. Intricate said, man, a lot of people on random channels do. I see. Okay, I got you. Okay, let me see. I've got so many comments that popped in. I missed some stuff. Um, these days, you don't need all that fluff. The cinema stuff is being made in home studios virtually. And once again, it depends. It really depends. Now, what I can say about some of these movies and they're making is a lot of stuff that you think the background and all that is a lot of that is blue and green screen. They're not actual real locations. Like if someone, you got Keanu Reeves in the Matrix flying through the air, he's not really flying. That's green screen, but they've been doing that for years. It's the illusion of making you think what it is. Same thing with plugins. They're an illusion to make you think they're real gear. So War says cell phone is a valid playback check. Most people on Earth listen that way, obviously, for systems require. And I'm going to say this for prior audio, but here you got to remember. Let's say this word. Even though people listen to it on the cell phone, doesn't mean that's the right way you should be listening to music. It's almost like you got 1 million people that smoke. Doesn't mean you should smoke because 1 million people are smoking cigarettes. But it's just become a norm. It's like a social norm. Everyone just does it. Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. It's kind of like anything else in life. You can have people that do stuff and never learn how to do it right. Everyone does it wrong, and it becomes normal. So, oh man, Never says, I think it's funny how religious people get on analog versus digital topic. I'm hybrid, so there's both no reason to dig into my gotcha. Like I said, it's kind of like, I'm going to say this. I'll say this again. If you are recording with analog gear, even if you still use a tape machine, outboard gear, you do it the traditional, the traditional way they did it. There's millions of records. I can go back and you listen to any 80s, whatever. We know dolls didn't exist in the 80s. Not what we use today. They didn't exist. They were recording on a console with tape machines, and they had an engineer that edited the tape, and they used outboard gear. And it sounds amazing. It sounds good. And there are people that record with VST instruments in the box. They use plugins and all that. And if they know what they're doing, it's going to sound good. So there is absolutely not one way or the other. Now, once again, what I was saying is that this is the reason why a lot of times when pros want to use better AD to D converters, because of the processing, that it makes it sound more authentic. That's all. No one's saying that you can't get away with using a $200 M-Audio interface, and no one's saying that it's not going to sound. If you know what you're doing, it's going to sound good. So let's see. Let me see. A word says emulate is a tricky. Yeah, like I said, it's kind of like, okay. And the reason I say is emulate. Okay, let's go. I'll use IK Multimedia plugins. It's kind of like when you look at their plugins and then you pull up one of their plugins. I don't care if it's IK Multimedia, T-Rex, like the one, or 1176, or an LA2A plugin by IK Multimedia. As soon as the plugin pops on the screen, it looks like a piece of rack gear. That would be an actual rack, but it's software, right? It looks like that piece of gear. That's an emulation, even though it's a plugin. Now, there are plugins that don't look like rack gear at all. Like some of the Waves plugins, like for example, if I went to one of the Waves, like the R type, which is basically a compressor, it looks like it just have a couple of buttons and it's got its own whatever. It's a compressor, but if you look at it, it doesn't look like a rack gear piece of compressor. It's not emulating a rack piece of gear. It looks like just software. Same thing with Fab Filter. Just, it's an EQ. It doesn't look like a piece of rack gear. So let me rephrase that then. There are plugins that are emulating rack gear, then they're just plugins that are just plugins. Let me change that. I'll retort. Oh, Rockport says they're not even doing green screen. They're doing simulate AI. Well, now AI, but AI is still fairly new. It's on a few years old, but I'm talking about, everything's pretty much AI now. Oh, got you. You said I didn't say cell phones is okay. It's a I said it's a valid mix check. I got you. Okay. So, I got a flash note. Personas is introduced to the Studio Live Series 3. But it's for me. Yeah, and like I said, here's the great thing about a cell phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android. If it sounds good on that, it probably sounds good on pretty much anything. That's one thing I can say. So if it's sounding good on your cell phone, it's probably going to sound good on a lot of sound media. So let's see what else. Deal says, I can't afford those yet. I don't know if I would invest that much if I could. Everything else could be upgraded, but necessarily how much, but would you be in what? I would say, believe it or not, studio monitors out of anything, if you want to invest and upgrade something, would be monitors. Because you can mix wrong and make bad decisions with bad studio monitors. Because you can only mix how you hear. The better you can hear, the better it will come out. So it's worth investing. It definitely is worth investing. And like I said, it's affordability is like this. If you, like me, some of the gear about, like I said, use Z Sounds. Z Sound has gear that you could make payments on. So let's say you bought a pair of $3,000, let's say barefoots, they're $1,500 a piece. And, with, let's say Z Sounds allows you to make $300 a month, or maybe let's say it's $260 a month for a year for those monitors. And I can afford to pay $260 a month. And you can get some high quality barefoot studio monitors. That's worth doing. I can't tell anyone about their finances and their choices to make. But if that's the route you need to do to get you where you need to be, where I need to make payments, there's nothing wrong with, I do it. I make payments at Z Sounds. I don't always dish out, that's how I got a lot of my Lindale audio gear. I just go in there, I get a couple of these compressors. It's only $70 a month. I'll just do that. That's what I do. And let me see. So let me see. I'm at this. Oh yeah. Here's another thing. I'm glad you mentioned that. Matthew says use whatever you want. I reckon everyone needs to. Here's the thing I want to say about when you got your audience. One thing I can say about that: don't assume that you can have all the most high quality gear in the world, and do not assume that your audience is going to listen to your music on high quality stuff. Sometimes a lot of your audience, that's what they're listening to the music on, is their iPhone or cell phone. They watch their videos through cell phones. They watch, YouTube. videos, and everything else through their iPhone or cell phone. And some of these cell phones, the speaker system isn't that bad, but of course, once you get a high end car with a high end stereo system, or like a movie theater, whatever, of course it's going to sound 10 times better. But um, that's also, but and sometimes also you can make a lot of mixing decisions and recording decisions and not hear how bad it sounds if you just listen to it through cell phones. You might not notice it, but then the minute you start playing it on a high-end system, you might start hearing flaws in it. Like, oh, I didn't hear that because I only listen to it on my cell phone. So you kind of got to make that. You got to kind of make that decision too. Back to says, let me see, Mix Club, welcome. Something looks different. Oh, mixed new lighting. Yep. Well, I had this lighting, but this, let me see, I got another lighting here. And that was a little extra bright. Oh, yeah, I guess it ain't too, because I changed the angle of it. That helped. Yeah, but I got some key, I got these lighting that changed with the camera. So I was trying to better my image quality over my videos. So yeah, there we go. Let me see. So, somebody else asked what good price range. Once again, it really depends. So okay, let me see. Got a few more. Let me see. Mixed Club says I got some old driven speakers from back in the day. I power up with those old tube amp and text misses on. That's more fun than anything. Every now and then I throw them on some older speakers too, just to see how they sound. Oh, it says, yeah, it looks better now. If they could. No, they're not, because they're LEDs. It ain't hot in here at all. Those lights aren't hot at all. So now I kind of wish I went to this camera a long time ago, but it is what it is. So let me see. Oh, so there's modeling mics, modeling preamps. Why are not monitors that emulate all my? Well, I don't know if that would be possible. I guess it could be. I don't know as far as are there modeling speakers, but it really depends. Really, I don't know. Don't have an answer for that one. But I'm gonna answer a few more. I'm gonna answer a few more chats, and that's it. He says there's nothing. So Slate could sell. Yeah, you talking about Slate and their modeling. I have Slate, but I don't use their mic modeling. I think Slate was really trying to push Slate was really trying to push a complete in the box system, even with their Raven, using nothing but their plug-in system, and just doing everything which I think would be fine. But it's almost to the point where it's kind of like where I see people that it's almost to the point where I see people where what's the word I'm looking for? They'll be using the keyboard mouse, and now eventually they want to get some sort of control service with a fader and all that, because they gotta, it gets to the point where I got to touch something to make me feel like I'm touching something real, even on a DAW or MIDI controller or DAW controller that has faders. So, say, do I have all of my synths connected to each other? No, they're not MIDI together. I do have sound modules that my keyboards are MIDI for that, like my my Roland Phantom S is actually also because I got a Roland XR, which is the rack mount of the Roland X. It's made to control that, and then I got my the Sonic, which is controlling my Proteuses because I got a Proteus 1 and 2, and I also got a Korg Wave Station that's also being controlled by that. But now all my keyboards now they are, as far as the outputs, the left and right outputs, they're all going to one mixer that's going into the output. That mixer goes into my patch bay, which gets into the console for me to record into for my recording. I do have that, so I can get any output. So all my keyboards will be hot. So that way I can record into directly into the DAW that way. So so let me see where. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see what else. Okay, I got you. Okay. Let's see. Um, I'm gonna do. I was going to. I gotta get my camera. Gotta. So I was gonna do some more how I record song videos. Um, so I got my batteries. I'm about to charge my battery so I can show people how I do that. People seen how I did it before, but I need to do those videos again as well. So let's see the Mix Club. I said I do have a question. Do you have a DAT? I have some old masters I might need to get printed. My DAT player busted. No, I've never had a DAT player. Um, so sorry. Let's see. Dio says, how close in the sound is the sound of the Korg Wave Station to the original keyboard? Do you notice a sonic difference in the signal? I've never actually had the actual Korg Wave Station synthesizer, so I don't have I don't have a way to compare it. I can compare the Wave Station to the actual plugin because I do have the Wave Station plugin, and one I can say is sonically, I don't hear too much of a difference, but I think the plugin sounds a little bit better, and I think it's simply because with the the operating system being a 64-bit, operating system, and they tailor that, it makes it sound better than when that came out, which computers were only 16-bit, if that makes sense. So I think the actual plugin sounds better than the actual unit. If that makes sense. So so somebody says a DATs. Yeah, oh yeah. A lot of times you can get a DAT on eBay pretty darn cheap. So it says, have I ever tried mixed cubes? I'm hesitant on getting like Orotones as an example. I see those are popular in a lot of studios. I've never thought about picking up a pair of cubes like that, like Orotones or something like that. I think Personas has something like that. I just never thought it might be a good idea to, because it's another listing format to see how your mix is going to come out. So, and then Rock says there are services that will convert your DATs to whatever you need. Yeah. Like I said, you probably can pick up another DAT player probably off of eBay pretty darn cheap, or Reverb. Oh, it says it's not the end of the world. It's just old stuff. I just want to go down memory lane. Yeah, I hear you. I do that all the time, especially when I start dropping in some of these cassette players or these cassettes and start listening to something like, man, something like some of that music that I did in the 90s was like, that's usable. The other stuff was like, no, that's not usable. So, Cube says sounds like a cell phone. I got you. And so no, just a 2-track, yeah. And of course, there go my neighbor. Gotta be heard. You got that alcohol, so now he got to turn the speaker up to get some attention. So I'm gonna turn the mic down a little bit. Here's the thing about my neighbor. I'm turning it down because all that bass. Y'all probably can hear the mic's probably picking that up. Here's the thing about my neighbor and his. You ever had someone? Whenever someone they got to have that kind of attention, they have to be suffering from some serious low self esteem. That they gotta I gotta I gotta blast my stereo that loud, and I'm gonna go slow just to see who's looking at me. Like, here's the thing that I learned this. I learned this tip from a rich person's tip. Never buy, never buy stuff to impress people that don't care about you. It's almost like someone that buys a. I'm gonna buy this. I'm gonna buy this $500,000 Bugatti to drive slow to see, get people to look at me. No one cares that you got a Bugatti. If they don't like, they don't care. You can have a Bugatti all day long. They don't care. Um, okay, so let me see. Oh, Mountain Man Network says I got a balance, dude. Have a good night. Okay, it's good. Yeah, I guess I'm about to end it myself. And then mix. It said you might be talking about ADAT. Now I do have ADATs. I have 6 of them. There's 3 of them just broke. The other 3 are 80 or ADAT XTs. I haven't turned them on in a while. Probably need to turn them on. So Dio says, so you think that the bit depth is making the plugin sound better? A lot of people use crushers to make the sound quality like sound sampler versus SP1200. Yeah, think about that for a second. It's no different than your DAW. You know, like if you take older DAWs that were 32-bit, like you think about when Windows was 32-bit and Mac with 32-bit, and when they went to 64-bit, because the computer can process more data. So they model the plugins, the more they can model these plugins sound with more processing, the better the plugins are going to sound. So absolutely. And ADATs are 8. Yeah, ADATs are 8 channels. They've always been 8 channels or 8 track. They've always been 8 track tape machines. The first ADATs were blackface ADATs, which I have. And then they came out with the ADAT XTs. They had the LT20s, and then they went to XT. I have the XT20s because they were just a better quality ADAT. They did tend to have less sync errors and problems with the heads, unlike the original blackface, because you really had to just like a regular tape machine, you had to maintenance those as well, because basically it's basically a high-end VCR. But it just records audio, and the output is being converted from AD to DA, which is basically A to D converters. In there, inside of those ADATs, there's digital conversion. That's why they're, stand for. I think it stands for analog digital or analog something tape. I gotta look at what ADAT stands for again. But let me see. CC Funk, like my once and said, ignorant people don't know they're in it. Blast. Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I said, my neighbor, he's got this Chrysler 300, and he'll drive. There's nobody in the neighborhood, but he'll drive slow, bass, trying to stay as loud as possibly can, thinking that we're all coming out just all like I'm all, like he's walking down the red carpet, like we're all drooling over his stereo system. Like nobody cares about you. All you're doing is annoying people, which is annoying because it's 10 o'clock at night here. People could be, some people get ready to go to bed. Some people could be watching a movie, watching the news. And then all of this is just really is annoying more than anything. It's disturbing. So, but he's probably got alcohol in him. And he's been like that ever since I've been in the neighborhood. He's like a 40-year-old kid. The mix said that's all I've ever had in the studio. I could be wrong, but A bunch of that got you. I like I said, I have ADATs. I started on ADATs in the 90s. Like ADATs, but the editing capability that you can do at a DAW is what really drawn me to working in DAWs because of the editing. Okay. Like I said, I don't own a DAT, so I'm not gonna get into the. Some people saying DATs are 2-channel. Some people saying 4 or 8. I don't know. I never owned a DAT. So, but anyhow, I'm going to call this a close for the night. Just wanted to talk about some gear stuff. And once again, I tune everyone for tuning in. And that seemed to be the topic today. Does gear matter? And I'm gonna put in with my little 2 cents into the video or the live stream. Gear only matters depending on the situation. That's the best way I can describe it. It only matters based on the situation. Other than that, I want to thank everyone for tuning in this Sunday. And once again, I'll see you in the next live stream, and we'll keep the chat going. Other than that, yeah, like I said, everybody's topping it like, yeah, sort of matter. Like I said, it depends. It does depend. Other than that, y'all have a great one, and we'll see you next time.